Fake HOA cops shattered 7 ribs in my wife. Navy SEAL, Dad emptied the M4 in 6 seconds. When 2 fake HOA enforcers attacked Emily Miller on her own driveway, they thought they could intimidate and steal without consequences. Masquerading as authority figures, they used violence against the innocent and nearly got away with it. But Jonathan Miller, a retired Navy SEAL and a husband who swore to protect, had a different ending in mind, and just wait until you see how 6 seconds changed everything, and why true justice finally prevailed. The morning unfurled gently over the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, a sleepy suburb tucked into the outer edges of Austin, Texas. Sunlight melted through the mist, wrapping the cul-de-sac in a golden glow. It was the kind of Saturday that made people slow down, breathe deeper, and believe that life, at least for now, was exactly as it should be. Jonathan Miller stood in the driveway of his modest 2-story home, a sponge in one hand and a garden hose in the other. Soap suds clung stubbornly to the curves of his Ford F-150, sliding down in lazy rivulets as he rinsed the last of the week's dust from its silver surface. His movements were unhurried, almost meditative, a rare luxury for a man who had once lived by the ticking seconds of combat missions half a world away. Jonathan wasn't a man easily rattled. Years in the Navy SEALs had forged him into someone built for chaos. But here, in this small corner of the world, chaos felt like a distant memory. Across the driveway, Emily was unloading groceries from the back of their SUV. The sound of paper bags crinkling and the occasional clink of glass bottles echoed softly through the still morning air. She wore a light blue sundress, her dark hair tumbling down her shoulders, catching the breeze like a flag of peace. Jonathan paused, letting the hose drop to his side. He watched her, really watched her, for a moment longer than necessary. There was a grace to her movements, even in the simplest tasks, a lightness he had always envied and fiercely protected. Emily glanced up and caught him staring. She laughed, a pure, easy sound that floated across the yard, filling him with something he hadn't always been sure he deserved: joy. Jonathan grinned back, wiping his hands on a towel tucked into his waistband. It was a good morning, one of those rare, flawless mornings that seemed to promise, without speaking, that the battles of yesterday were gone and the fears of tomorrow were far away. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed to life. Children's laughter drifted from a backyard 2 houses over. A jogger passed by, offering a casual wave. Jonathan nodded back, feeling for once completely ordinary. It was perfect. Too perfect. Because in the real world, peace isn't permanent. It's fragile, fleeting. Sometimes it's just the final, trembling breath before everything breaks apart. Parked just around the corner, idling low behind a stand of oaks, sat a weathered Chevy Malibu. Inside, 2 men watched. Patient, calculating. They didn't look dangerous. That was the point. From where Jonathan stood, rinsing suds from his truck and basking in a rare morning of calm, they were invisible. From where Emily hummed softly to herself, loading the last of the groceries into her arms, they were just part of the landscape. No alarms, no sirens, no warnings. Just a perfect Saturday morning. And the last moment of peace they would know for a very long time. Emily balanced 2 heavy grocery bags against her hip, nudging the SUV door shut with her elbow. The familiar weight of ordinary things, milk, bread, fresh fruit, grounded her in the simple rhythm of the morning. She didn't notice the 2 men right away. They approached from the sidewalk with a kind of casual purpose, reflective vests gleaming under the sun. One of them, tall, with a thick beard, held up a plastic badge, clipped to his vest like a cheap afterthought. The other, stockier and clean-shaven, hung back slightly, scanning the yard, the house, the open garage. "Ma'am?" the tall one barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the warm air. "You're violating HOA regulations." Emily blinked, thrown off by the sudden confrontation. She shifted the grocery bags to one arm and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. "I'm sorry?" she asked, keeping her voice polite but firm. "We don't have an HOA here." For a split second, silence hung between them, thick and uneasy. The man's expression twisted into something sour, a sneer creeping across his face. He stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that immediately set off alarms in her mind. Behind him, the second man pulled out a clipboard, flipping through a few loose papers with exaggerated importance, as if trying to legitimize their presence. Emily backed up half a step, the SUV pressing against her lower back. Her instincts, dulled by the normalcy of the morning, now buzzed to life. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "We've had multiple complaints," the bearded man continued, his tone growing harsher. "Unauthorized vehicles, trash violations, unapproved landscaping." Emily opened her mouth to respond, to tell them again, calmly, that there was no homeowners association on this street. But she never got the chance. The man's hand shot out faster than she could react. Fingers clamped around her upper arm, squeezing hard. "Hey!" she cried, instinctively jerking away. But the man shoved, hard. The world tilted. Her grocery bags tumbled to the ground, oranges and cans spilling across the driveway like fallen soldiers. Emily staggered back, her foot catching the edge of the curb. There was no time to catch herself. She hit the pavement with a sharp, jarring thud, the air punching out of her lungs in a single, broken gasp. Pain bloomed across her side, vivid and immediate. The breath she tried to draw next came shallow, ragged. For a moment, everything around her seemed distant. The trees swaying, the buzz of the neighbor's lawnmower, even the concerned barking of a dog down the street. And above her, the two men loomed, shadows blotting out the sun. One crouched, rifling through her fallen purse without a word. The other stood watch, his gaze flickering across the street, across the houses, casual, indifferent, as if they had done this before. They weren't real officers. They weren't protecting anyone. They were predators hiding in plain sight. And just a few yards away, water still ran from the garden hose onto the driveway, unnoticed. Jonathan Miller turned, sensing, without fully understanding yet, that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The sharp sound snapped across the driveway like a branch breaking underfoot. Jonathan's head jerked up instinctively, soapsuds still clinging to his fingers. He didn't see her fall, not immediately. He heard it first, the brutal, hollow crack of bone against concrete, the sound no husband should ever have to hear. And then he saw her. Emily crumpled on the ground near the curb, her face twisted in a grimace of agony, one arm clutching her side as she gasped for air. Time slowed. The driveway, once soaked in sunlight and laughter, now seemed colder, harsher. The sound of the lawnmower faded. The children's laughter disappeared. The world narrowed to a single, horrifying image. Emily, helpless, broken. Jonathan dropped the hose without thinking. Water continued to spill, unnoticed, pooling around his boots as he moved. Emily tried to sit up but immediately collapsed back onto the concrete, her body betraying her. Every shallow breath she drew seemed to slice through her chest, sharp and unnatural. Across from her, one of the men knelt casually beside her fallen purse. He sifted through its contents without urgency, flipping through her wallet, examining keys, inspecting her phone. As if he had every right to be there, as if this were just another errand on his list. The second man, the taller one, stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his posture relaxed. There was no panic, no remorse, only a cold, practiced indifference, as though hurting someone was as routine as checking the mail. Jonathan's heart hammered against his ribs, each beat echoing louder than the last. A deep primal heat rose in his chest, tightening around his throat, blurring the edges of his vision. He wasn't thinking in words anymore. Training and instinct took over where rational thought ended. His wife, the woman he had vowed to protect through every storm and hardship, lay broken on their own driveway. And these men, these strangers, had done it like it meant nothing. Jonathan took a step forward, then another. Every muscle in his body coiled like a drawn bow. This was no misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was an attack, and he was already past the point of forgiveness. Jonathan didn't think. He moved. The second the sound of Emily's fall reached his ears, the moment he saw her crumpled form on the concrete, something deep and old awoke inside him. Something he thought he had left on the battlefields across oceans. But it was there, sharp and alive, the training, the instincts, the endless drills meant for moments exactly like this. React, neutralize, protect. His boots pounded against the driveway as he sprinted towards the two strangers, fists already curling so tight his knuckles blanched white. The world around him, the blue sky, the hum of distant lawnmowers, the golden shimmer of the morning, blurred into nothing. Only Emily mattered. Only the threat stood between him and her. The taller fake officer spotted him first. There was a split-second flicker of surprise in his eyes, a moment where he realized he had underestimated the man coming at him. He tried to brace himself, stepping forward awkwardly, arms raising into a crude block. But Jonathan was already inside his reach. With the efficiency born of 1,000 repetitions, Jonathan twisted his torso, dropped his center of gravity, and caught the man's momentum. A perfect hip throw, clean, controlled, devastating. The man's feet left the ground. He crashed onto the hard concrete with a muffled grunt, the air knocked from his lungs. The driveway shook slightly under the impact. Jonathan didn't stop to see if he would get up. His focus snapped to the second man, the stockier one, who stood a few yards back. For a heartbeat, the man froze, weighing his options. Run? Fight? Then Jonathan saw it, the subtle movement of a hand darting toward the man's belt, the flicker of silver catching the light. A blade, short, sharp, and far too close. Jonathan's pulse spiked. The distance between them wasn't much. If the man charged now, Emily would be defenseless. Jonathan's mind calculated possibilities with terrifying speed. Close distance? Too risky unarmed. Disarm? Not with Emily lying injured behind him, vulnerable. He needed a weapon. Now. He glanced around. The hose lay on the ground, water still gurgling from the nozzle. Useless. The gravel scattered along the edges of the lawn would slow him more than it would stop a knife. His truck was too far. The tool rack in the garage was too far. Then he saw it. The porch. The hidden panel. The safe. 3 strides. Maybe 4. He could reach it. If he moved now. If he didn't hesitate. Across from him, the man with the blade crouched slightly, his body angling forward, muscle coiling to spring. His lips curled into a tight, unpleasant grin, the kind that belonged to someone who thought they had already won. But Jonathan Miller was not prey. He was not a victim. He was a man who had walked through storms and battles, who had faced worse odds with less to fight for, and won. The world around him seemed to exhale in one long, tense breath. The water from the hose hissed against the driveway. Emily whimpered softly, clutching her side. The wind rustled the leaves overhead, whispering secrets Jonathan could not afford to hear. He adjusted his stance, weight balanced perfectly, ready to explode into motion. Across from him, the blade caught the sun again, a flash of silver, a whisper of danger. The man shifted his foot forward, committing. Jonathan didn't wait. In a single explosive burst, he launched toward the porch, legs driving him forward like pistons. Every step was a countdown. Every heartbeat was a warning. Behind him, he could hear the man move too, faster now, sensing the chase, the predator in pursuit. But Jonathan wasn't running away. He was running to something. The M4, his old friend, his guardian. And once it was in his hands, the game would end. 3 strides. That was all it took. Jonathan's boots hit the porch in perfect rhythm, each impact vibrating through his frame. His fingers, slick from water and sweat, found the concealed panel by the door without hesitation. A half-turn, a smooth pull. The hidden safe sprang open with a quiet mechanical click, a sound so familiar it might as well have been part of his heartbeat. Inside, nestled with almost reverent care, lay the M4 rifle. Jonathan seized it in one clean motion. The cold, balanced weight of it settled into his palms like it had never left him. It was an extension of his will, a tool built for precision, for control, for moments exactly like this. His thumb brushed the safety. His shoulder tucked the stock instinctively into the pocket of his frame. The iron sights aligned with his vision, like old friends greeting each other after a long separation. There was no anger now, no panic, only focus. Jonathan stepped off the porch, breathing deep, steadying the pounding in his chest. The air tasted sharper, metallic, electric, every sense sharpened, every movement deliberate. Down the driveway he saw them, the two men scrambling toward a battered Chevy Malibu, parked half on the curb, half on the street. The car's paint was faded and peeling. The rear license plate was missing. Typical. The taller one fumbled with the door handle, cursing under his breath. The stockier one, the one with the blade, was already yanking open the passenger side, casting frantic glances over his shoulder. Jonathan moved closer, steps measured and silent. The rifle rose smoothly to his shoulder. Through the sights, the scene snapped into crystal clarity. Two men who had come to prey on the vulnerable. Two men who had attacked his wife. Two men who now tried to escape the consequences of their choices. His finger found the trigger. The pad of his fingertip pressed against it, slow and steady, a breath away from commitment. Jonathan inhaled once, deeply, held it, exhaled, the chaos around him, the shouting, the slamming of car doors, the squeal of desperate tires, faded into a muted hum. All that mattered was the moment, the choice, the duty. He would not let them vanish into another neighborhood. He would not let another family suffer what they had brought to his door. The rifle steadied. The world stilled. Jonathan's voice was a whisper inside his own mind. End this. The world held its breath. Jonathan's hands, steady as stone, guided the barrel of the M4 with calm precision. Through the iron sights, the chaos ahead sharpened into stark focus. Two men scrambling, desperate, wild with fear. They had made their choices. Now they would live with the consequences. Pop. The first shot cracked through the air like a hammer striking steel, a clean, decisive sound that tore through the morning stillness. The bullet punched through the front fender of the Malibu, sending a violent shudder through the frame of the car. Pop. The second round shattered the rearview mirror, glass raining down like glitter under the harsh sunlight. The taller man ducked instinctively, nearly losing his grip on the car door. Pop. The third shot struck the hood, ripping into the engine block. A shriek of tortured metal answered back as smoke began to billow from beneath the crumpled steel. Pop. The fourth round blew out the front tire. The car, no longer balanced, jerked violently to the left and ground to a halt, half spun across the street, dead in the water. Pop. The fifth shot caught the rear window, spiderwebbing it in an instant, shards cascading inward onto the torn back seat. Pop. The sixth and final shot punched through the trunk lid, leaving a clean hole, a signature carved into the rusted metal, and then silence, broken only by the low hiss of the dying engine and the soft groan of the car settling into its own wreckage. Smoke curled lazily into the sky. The smell of burnt rubber and scorched metal hung heavy in the thickening air. For a moment everything was still, frozen in the raw aftermath of controlled violence. Then chaos erupted. The two fake officers bailed from the car like startled animals. They hit the asphalt hard, scrambling to their feet, hands raised high in frantic surrender. Their faces, moments ago smug and commanding, were now masks of pure terror. Eyes wide, mouths working wordlessly, every instinct inside them screaming one truth, louder than all the rest. They had lost. Jonathan didn't move. He kept the rifle steady, sights trained on them with unshakable calm. Not a muscle twitched. Not a breath was wasted. He didn't need to say a word. His message had already been delivered, loud, clear, and undeniable. The minutes that followed felt like they stretched into hours. Jonathan stood on the edge of the driveway, the weight of the M4 still firm in his hands, the world around him slowly coming back into focus. The faint hiss of the damaged car's engine, the low murmur of voices from curious neighbors gathering at the ends of their driveways, the distant wail of sirens growing louder with every heartbeat. Jonathan lowered the rifle, flipped the safety on, and gently leaned it against the porch column, keeping it within reach but no longer needing to wield it. He turned to reward Emily. She was sitting on the ground now, her back propped carefully against the side of the SUV. One arm clutched protectively around her ribs, her other hand reaching out blindly, instinctively, needing something solid to hold on to, needing him. Jonathan crossed to her in 3 strides and sank down beside her, gathering her carefully against his chest. Emily clutched his shirt, her fingers twisting into the fabric like a lifeline. She was trembling, but breathing. Alive. He rested his chin lightly against the crown of her head, one arm wrapped firmly around her shoulders, the other hand gently covering hers. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The sirens arrived in a rush, flashing red and blue lights, painting the street, the trees, even the smoke rising from the battered Malibu. Police cruisers skidded to controlled stops along the curb, officers pouring out with weapons drawn, eyes scanning the scene, assessing threat levels in split-second bursts. Jonathan stayed exactly where he was, calm and unmoving, his empty hands clearly visible. 2 officers immediately secured the 2 fake HOA enforcers, now lying prone on the asphalt with their hands over their heads, faces pressed into the pavement. More officers swept the area with methodical precision. It didn't take long. In the back seat of the battered Malibu, they found counterfeit HOA badges printed on cheap cardstock, stacks of stolen mail from various addresses, a collection of burglary tools, lock picks, crowbars, even a crowfoot wrench, and tucked beneath the driver's seat, concealed inside a ripped canvas bag, a handgun. One of the officers, a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense voice, approached Jonathan cautiously. "You the homeowner?" he asked. Jonathan simply nodded. The officer's gaze flicked toward Emily, the bruises starting to form along her arm, the way she leaned heavily against her husband for support. He took in the smoking car, the broken glass, the evidence bag already filling with stolen property. He gave a short nod, his jaw tightening. "You did what you had to," he said quietly. There would be paperwork, of course, statements to be taken, facts to be verified. But the real picture was already clear. Jonathan had defended his home, defended his wife, and in doing so, he had stopped something far worse from happening, not just to them, but perhaps to someone who wouldn't have been able to fight back. Jonathan tightened his arm around Emily, drawing her a little closer, feeling the slow, steady beat of her heart against his side. He let out a long, silent breath. For now, it was enough. Justice was coming, and this time it wasn't a question. In the days that followed, the story of what had happened on that quiet street traveled fast through local news, neighborhood groups, and word of mouth. Jonathan and Emily's names became almost a legend among their neighbors, a symbol of standing firm when it mattered most. But true closure came not from headlines or hushed conversations. It came from the words spoken in a calm, deliberate voice behind the oak doors of the Travis County Courthouse. The district attorney's statement was short, but it carried the full weight of the law. No charges will be filed against Mr. Jonathan Miller. The Texas Castle Doctrine applies in full. He acted within his rights to defend himself, his wife, and his home from unlawful aggression. There was no room for doubt, no gray areas, no second-guessing. Jonathan had done exactly what the law expected any citizen to do when confronted with a threat inside the sanctuary of their own property. He had protected what mattered, decisively, lawfully, and with necessary force. As for the 2 men who had masqueraded as authority figures, using fear and violence to prey on unsuspecting families, their reckoning was swift and absolute. A grand jury handed down a list of charges that painted a clear picture of their intentions: aggravated assault, attempted robbery, impersonating a law enforcement officer, Each charge alone was serious. Together, they carried the weight of years, even decades, behind bars. When the verdicts came, there was no leniency, no appeals to misunderstanding or youthful mistakes. Each man was sentenced to 15 years in state prison, no chance of parole, no early release. Justice had not just been served, it had been carved into stone. Jonathan and Emily sat quietly in the back of the courtroom that day, Emily's hand clasped tightly in Jonathan's. They didn't cheer when the sentences were read. They didn't exchange triumphant glances. They simply closed their eyes for a moment and breathed. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about anger. It was about the simple, powerful truth that in a world full of uncertainty, there were still places where right and wrong mattered, where standing your ground meant something, where protecting your family was not just a right, it was a duty honored by law and by conscience alike. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone down on the city streets, and for the first time in days, Jonathan Miller allowed himself a quiet smile, not of pride, not of victory, but of peace. Recovery was slow. 7 broken ribs don't heal in days. They linger. Every movement hurt. Every breath came with a reminder of what had happened on that warm Saturday morning. For Emily, healing wasn't just physical. It was learning to trust the quiet again. To believe that the simple act of unloading groceries in the driveway didn't come with danger hiding behind it. There were hard days, sleepless nights when the pain flared sharp and sudden, stealing her breath away. Moments when frustration and fear crept in, uninvited, gnawing at the edges of her calm. But through it all, Jonathan was there, silent, steady, unwavering. He never missed a doctor's appointment. He never let her lift anything heavier than a coffee cup. He never once let her see the worry that flickered behind his eyes late at night when he thought she was asleep. Every painful breath reminded Emily of one unbreakable truth. She was not alone. She would never be alone. Jonathan had made a vow long before the ceremony and the rings, a vow forged not in words, but in the quiet promises written across years of shared struggles, long deployments, and silent homecomings. He would always protect her. Always. One afternoon, when the worst of the pain had begun to fade into a dull, manageable ache, Emily found Jonathan in the garage. He stood over the old gun safe near the entryway, a small wooden plaque in his hands. The wood was rough, the letters carved by hand, uneven but deliberate, every stroke filled with a kind of fierce tenderness. He mounted it carefully above the safe, wiping the dust from the surface, stepping back to admire his work. Emily leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed lightly over her chest, watching him with a smile that carried all the sorrow and strength of the months behind them. The sign read, "This home is protected by righteous fury." It wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about love, the kind of love that stands its ground, the kind that fights when it must, the kind that bends but never breaks. And as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the open garage door, catching the edges of the wooden plaque in a warm golden glow, Emily realized something. They hadn't just survived. They had built something stronger, a home held together not by walls or locks, but by trust, by resilience, and by the unshakable bond between them. Steel and love, both unbreakable,